Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, Bared Knuckles, a retrospective on the many, many more beat-em-ups I've played. Brawlers, beat-em-ups, belt-scrollers. There are many names for a genre focused on 2 to 4 player cooperative play, where you and your friends adopt the guise of some sort of martial arts master, taking on literal hordes of gang members, monsters, rogue cops, and the like, in the pursuit of two-fisted justice. The beat 'em up, once as popular in the arcade as pinball machines and shoot 'em ups, was eventually supplanted on the one versus one fighting game scene with titles like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. For a glorious most of a decade, from around 1986 to 1995, just about every company who was anybody in the arcade scene produced some sort of brawler, each with a simple premise. From 2 to 4 guys punching their way to the heart of a corrupt city office, to monsters, to robots bashing their way onto an alien fortress, or even stranger and more exotic locales, looking to be unique, stand out, or wow the audience enough to spend their quarters upon. And of course, I played a ton of them. Yet eventually, there was obvious burnout in the genre. There really is only so many times you can take such a formula and keep stretching it out thinner and thinner, adding additional mechanics until it becomes cumbersome or morphs into something else entirely. And quite simply, the players are going to want something new. We as players have seen this before in other genres that got way too much of a good thing. And the move away from arcades, as the concept of the arcade itself began to die out, and onto the exploding success of the home console market, would keep the beat 'em up alive for a little longer. Yet in time, it too would go dormant, much like a cicada with boxing gloves taped to it. There is only so many times you can knock cheeseburgers or whole barbecue roasts out of an oil barrel to eat before such unhealthy habits catch up with you. Yet in time, all things come back around, and the beat 'em up has returned to the game market with such games as Streets of Rage 4 or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. I'm glad to see them back, even if only as a niche novelty in the current open world DLC and microtransaction driven marketplace. Sometimes it's just good to sit with friends on local co-op and have a good beer and pretzels time knocking the utter crap out of the bad guys du jour. Longtime listeners of the show are well aware that I've reviewed a fair number of high-profile and occasionally infamous brawler titles. I've been a guest on other shows talking about such titles. But not every brawler deserves its own show, or is well known or well regarded enough for a 5 to 35 minutes of me doing a waxing poetic review. And in this episode, dear listener, I will try to do justice to all of those also-rans and forgotten gems, or perhaps lost and little-known titles, that I was able to put my grubby arcade hands on, back in the day where we weren't so worried about how many grease and cigarette ash-covered control sticks we touched on a Friday or Saturday night, in between rounds of bowling alley snacks and arcade skee-ball ticket machines and their trash trophies. But let's get started. First up, we have Bad Dudes, also known as Bad Dudes vs. Dragon Ninja. This arcade classic, brought to us in 1988 by Japanese developer Data East, was about as basic as it came. 2 guys in wife beaters and sweatpants must rescue the President of the United States of America, which the game dutifully called President Ronnie because, well, you are rescuing Ronald Reagan. Awkward now in 2025. And as the opening text crawl graphic asks us, are you in fact a bad enough dude to accomplish this monumental job that not even the combined forces of the United States military could complete? And this title is a clearinghouse for all of the early 1980s ninja action movie tropes in one game. Ninjas in the streets, ninjas in the sheets, one assumes anyway. Ninjas on 18-wheeler convoys, ninjas in different color outfits, ninja dogs, ninjas with dwarfism, ninjas on trains, ninjas on the brain, all falling to two gym rats with nunchucks and refilling their health with cans of Coca-Cola. And really, what could be more American than that? This is the kind of game Michael Dudikoff would have been proud to star in. And if you get that reference without Googling it, you are old. Bad Dudes was a simple two-player coin-fed co-op game. But by the time I was playing it, no one else was. I played this both in its native arcade, and I got a copy of it on the NES port, where the home console would screech its iconic end-of-stage line, "I'm bad," through my television speakers like a 3-bottle-a-day whiskey drunk being dipped asshole first in a barrel of toxic waste. Both things that also became staples of life in the 1980s. 7 linear, flat 2D stages lay between you and President Ronnie. And could there be a better team than Dude 1 and Dude 2? Well, yes, of course. But in a world where you are rescuing President Ronnie and being rewarded with hamburgers with the Prez for all your hard work, sounds oddly prophetic these days, Dude 1 and Dude 2 were the best we could hope for. Next up, Alien vs. Predator on the SNES. Not to be confused with the legendary Capcom arcade brawler of the same name, because that confusion is how I ended up with this turkey. This 1993 title on the SNES was brought to us by developer Jorudan, although it was published in North America by Activision. And as they prominently put that on the box, I thought they were the ones responsible for this travesty. If you never heard of Jorudan, neither did I until I looked them up. And it turns out they made a lot of nothing burger games until 2009, when they made the lateral move to running jorudan.co.jp, a public transport route navigation website. That's it. In this title, where all the animation is at best 5 frames of stock images, and the difficulty spike is the same one the team uses to ram up your ass, you play a single cardstock predator punching and occasionally shooting with his single-use shoulder-mounted laser cannon its way through an alien hive on the distant infested human colony of New Shanghai on the planet Vega 4. None of this backstory matters, of course, as the aliens are as cardstock as the predator, and use their unfair hit stun and cheap shots to make sure this one is a slog. This game does not have a Metacritic score. However, the movie Alien vs. Predator Requiem has a 12% on the review website Rotten Tomatoes, and I am quite sure that score is still higher than what this fucking game deserves. I never completed it. I don't think I actually could. And I am quite okay with spending the rest of my life, and whatever life I have left, never having done so. Next up, Captain America and the Avengers. Another Data East joint, this 1991 game features, well, some of the Avengers team with Captain America, Iron Man, Hawkeye, and Vision. This arcade cabinet was a 4-player one that I knew of. And the graphics were almost as fuzzy and simple and pastel, with the sprites being unusually small for the screen size of the cabinet. The plot is eminent villain Red Skull has assembled a bunch of low to mid-quality villains from the greater Marvel universe to take over the world with, so be prepared, to superhero punch a boatload of generic fanatical thugs with the likes of Claw, Living Laser, Whirlwind, Wizard, Grim Reaper, a Sentinel, Juggernaut, Ultron, the Mandarin, the Controller, and Crossbones. And those are your big bosses. If you don't know half of them, don't worry about it. I'm sure they'll show up in a future Marvel movie at some point. The game was ported to the SNES, Genesis, Game Boy, and Game Gear. But the arcade is really the best place to play it. There's really nothing more to say beyond this game is like playing an Avengers side story about Red Skull coming up with another ridiculous and easily thwarted by the power of fist world domination plan to keep the comic print run going in between something like the massive time gap between the Infinity Gauntlet and Secret Invasion storylines. But it was a fun romp, nonetheless. Next up, Captain Commando. This solid 1991 entry by Capcom stars the titular Captain Commando, Capcom's comic bookish spokescharacter made for Capcom USA in the 1980s. Set in a far future version of Metro City in the year of 2026, the same setting as Final Fight. And it would seem the reign of Mayor Mike Hagar has brought about a golden age of technological advancement for the city until a new boom in superpowered crime threatens to cause the downfall of Metro City. Captain Commando is joined by his three weird as fuck companions: Mac the Knife, a mummy alien; Ginzu the Ninja, descendant of the fighting style used by Guy from Final Fight; and Baby Head, a super genius infant piloting a fighting robot of his own design. This team is dedicated to eradicating crime from Earth and in the entire galaxy, and must defeat the forces of the alien Scumicide. This is a no fucks given plot and a wild ride through multiple stages of eye-catching and seizure-inducing color and lights. And since it has been re-released on the mostly modern consoles with the Capcom Beat 'em Up Collection bundle, you absolutely owe it to yourself to play this fever dream follow-up to Final Fight at least once. Next up, the Combat Tribes. Technos Japan brought us this title to the arcades in 1990. A 2 to 3 player affair where 3 vigilantes must destroy the rest of future New York's other gangs. Sort of like the Terminator meets the Warriors. The playable characters, color-coded red, blue, and yellow, possess the names Blitz, Berserker, and Buliva, in that same order. There are 6 stages ruled over by themed gangs, such as a clown gang or a punk rock gang. And the game ends when all the bosses of each stage are fought again in a boss rush-style brawl, where the final crime boss ruling all the gangs is killed by a female cyborg named Martha Splatterhead, who must in turn be defeated by the players. The sprites are huge, chunky, and squarish, and the plot is non-existent. But if you need a retro game to waste time with, you could do worse. Crime Fighters. This 1989 4-player Konami beat-em-up was released the same year as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the difference in both graphics, style, and content and success between the games couldn't be more different. You can pick one of 4 practically identical characters, all of whom wear white t-shirts but different colored jeans, red, blue, yellow, or green, except for the 2 characters who have obvious darker skin tones. Your health ticks down every second on its own, so the pressure is on to rush through the stage as well as not get hit and find healing items. The crime fighters, I gathered, are beating up gangs to find out who is trafficking all the women in town and stop them. I never did beat this one. Ironically, this game was the one I was playing at 10 a.m. in an arcade in San Antonio, Texas, when I almost got arrested for truancy by the San Antonio police, despite the fact that I didn't live in Texas and wasn't due back at school until at least another week later back in Scranton, PA. We were on a late summer family vacation, and I was in the arcade alone to give my folks some alone time. Luckily, my Boy Scout pack leader was a cop himself and insisted his troop have IDs made up, just in case of such emergencies. So I handed my PA ID over to the 2 officers, and then the 2 cops radioed back to headquarters to ask what a Pennsylvania ID looked like. Confirmed that I had the genuine article, they both stomped off in a huff, mad they couldn't cuff me or bully me. All cops are bastards, I suppose. Our next title is Double Dragon. Look, you know this name, I know this name. This is a legendary title in gaming and beat-em-ups, released in 1987 by Technos Japan. and it can be argued it started the brawler craze. 1 to 2 players take control of Billy and Jimmy Lee, characters very much modeled on martial art legend Bruce Lee during his Enter the Dragon film period, and the goal of beating up every gang member in the area to recover Billy's girlfriend Marion from the gang leader Willie. If a single player defeats Willie, the game ends. But if 2 players defeat Willie, the players must fight each other to see who will win Marion's love. Very 80s, very macho, and very much woman as property. This is also the game that gave us the gaming pop culture villain Abobo, the bald, muscular strongman who was the focus of an unlicensed parody game named Abobo's Big Adventure, created by former iMockery creator Roger Barr and a small staff at Team Bobo. And the game was meant to mimic Double Dragon in its every way possible. Yoshihisa Kishimoto, creator of Double Dragon, even gave the parody title his support. If you're going to parody a beat 'em up, you might as well parody the best and get the original creator on your side. And I hope Roger Barr is doing okay wherever he is. He had something terrible happen to him some years back, and he dropped out of content creation life. Anyone interested can read it on his iMockery site. Roger, if by chance you stumble upon this somehow, remote as that may be, my thoughts go out to you, brother. Super Double Dragon, also known as Double Dragon 4. This 1992 SNES title brought us once again by Technos Japan, and in it we see the return of Billy and Jimmy Lee as they traverse the world fighting the Shadow Warriors gang across casinos, airports, on top of a truck, and 7 stages in total to finally reach the gang boss. The game introduces a new maneuver to the standard kick and punch, a guard button, and if you block at the right time, you can even grab the arm of your attacker and really lay some beatings on them. Another in the sadly never completed pile, this one was pretty tough. With the enemies having gobs of health, and with the timing on the block and grab system, key to the success of your game, not being the best, put this game solidly out of my reach. But if you beat it, awesome. Hope you had fun. Next up are a joint review of Final Fights 2 and 3. Coming to the American market in 1993 and 1996 respectively. These 2 titles continue on directly from their 1989 progenitor Final Fight. Both games are linked by having Hagar as a playable character role, but both Guy and Cody are gone for the second game, being replaced by a revolving door cast of largely forgettable assisting characters who fill those missing roles. Guy returns in the third game, and 2 more forgettable characters are added to expand the chaos. The second game spans the globe to destroy the remains of the Mad Gear gang, and the third game sees the player trying to save Metro City yet again from a new threat, the Skull Cross gang. There are a lot of good things going on for these games. The graphics have received a fresh coat of paint and are much improved from the 1989 arcade original. And unlike the SNES port of the original, both games support 2-player co-op gameplay. And Final Fight 3 even has the option to play alongside a computer-controlled partner. But here's the thing, dear listeners. Compared to the original game, I was disappointed by these direct sequels. They do what it says on the tin. You punch and kick with your digital fightin' man action figure. The bad guys lose health until they fall down, rinse, and repeat. And while these are quality mid-90s Capcom action games, they are also bland. They lack any sort of spice or innovation. I'm sure some of you are screaming, how could a series of games about a bunch of dudes punching each other into severe brain damage be innovative? But I ask you to look at their other in-house properties. Captain Commando, Alien vs. Predator, the Dungeons & Dragons titles, and of course games like Street Fighter and Marvel vs. Capcom. While Final Fight was one of the games that launched 1,000 beat-em-ups, it was becoming obvious, especially by 1996, that some form of franchise fatigue was setting in. and all the creative power was being funneled in other divisions, especially with the release of future gaming Hall of Famer Resident Evil on the way. Neither Final Fight 2 nor 3 are bad games. They are just very boring and safe titles, and I don't feel they hold up to the legacy of their own franchise with the same punch as their predecessor. King of Dragons. Arriving on store shelves a few years before the Dungeons & Dragons Tower of Doom title, Capcom took a run at the fantasy beat-em-up with this 1991 title. 2 players can pick from the 5 fantasy tropes on display: fighter, elf, dwarf, cleric, and wizard. And defeating enemies gains experience the characters can level up with, usually meaning they get new weapons or magic and a little bit more health. The game has 16 short levels of fighting orcs, goblins, and thugs on the way to defeating a red dragon and earning wealth and glory. So, off-brand D&D at its most basic. Originally an arcade hit, it was ported to the SNES where I played it. And all outfits at the time gave it mixed reviews at best and suffered from low sales compared to its arcade original. I enjoyed this one a lot, but despite it being almost insultingly simple to play, aim the character at enemy, press button to swing sword until victory, I was bad at it and I was usually out of continues by the mid-game. Perhaps that's one of the reasons for the SNES's port's mixed reviews. Ah well. King of Dragons is proof you can be bad at a game and still enjoy it. Knights of the Round. Not done with the fantasy brawlers, and not to be outdone by themselves, Capcom also released Knights of the Round in 1991 to arcades. This time the player must choose between King Arthur and his 2 knights Lancelot and Percival to unite Britain under Arthur's rule now that he has drawn Excalibur from the stone. Why, you ask? Because Merlin said so. And that's all the 3 heroes of cultural antiquity need to know while they're off to dethrone the evil King Garibaldi, a name never associated with English royalty, or in any way the Arthurian legends, epic poems, or late Middle Ages books, and take his place. This title also came to the SNES in 1994 and got mixed reviews at best. I can see why. The gameplay is stiffer than Arthur upon seeing Guinevere for the first time, and the graphics are muddy compared to the original arcade game port. Which is odd because Capcom ports usually were pretty faithful to the original look, even if brought over to a less powerful system and graphics board. While this and King of Dragons were cool novelty beat-em-ups using a type of fantasy setting Japan really has no knowledge of as a culture beyond some loose association with European culture or history, you are better off playing Capcom's Dungeons & Dragons beat-em-ups if you want a fantasy beat-em-up with role-playing elements done right. Next is River City Ransom. Known by other names globally, and the third in the Kuiku no Kun series, this 1989 NES beat-em-up is perhaps one of the wackiest games I've played in the genre. And I mean that in a Looney Tunes sort of way. This was also an adventure title as opposed to a straight brawler, where you need to wander around town beating up rival school gangs. Yes, this game was inspired by the high school delinquency problems of Japan, and on the original creator's own time in high school in the 1970s getting into constant fights. And you must steal the pocket change of the people you defeat to buy better shoes, clothes, food, and martial arts training. The characters, Alex and Ryan, must punch, kick, and body slam their way across town to save Ryan's girlfriend Cindy from rival gang leader Slick, who is holed up in River City High. The sprites are little more than chubby squares with googly eyes glued to them, and defeated enemies yell out phrases like "Yikes" and "Barf" when they flicker off screen. The characters ram entire plates of food in their mouths while eating, dinnerware and all. And the gangs have names like the Squids and the Generic Dudes, an homage to the 1950s Americana high school gang culture naming convention. This game also has a password system, so you don't have to try and finish this open world sandbox NES game in one go. The game is still available through the Switch's NES app, and probably anywhere emulation is available. But for sheer goofy good time in a clean, clear 8-bit package, this is a good one. Mother Russia Bleeds. Now from the wackiest beat 'em up to what must be one of the tonally darkest brawlers I have ever played. This 2016 title comes to us from Le Cartel and Devolver Digital, one of the better indie studios out there, and one willing to take chances on games with odd premises. The plot takes place in an alternate 1980s USSR ruled by Russian mobsters, and our four playable characters, Sergei, Natasha, Boris, and Ivan, are four Russian Romani people working for a guy named Mikhail and make money street fighting in the slums for entertainment. During a bout, the Russian military breaks in and kidnaps these gypsies, only to drag them off to a secret weapons lab to experiment on them. A month later, the group wakes up in an old prison, and all are addicted to a new drug named Necro, which causes them to become super soldiers but suffer increasingly violent hallucinations. The mob and the government are working together to sell the drug, and the four fight their way to the tops of the government. If you can refrain from healing during the game, as the characters use Necro to heal, you get an epilogue where they kick the drug and get healed by a secret benefactor, even if they are hidden away after the game being hailed as ultra-violent heroes. If you can't and must heal, then the party dies during the final fight, fatally taxed by the drug, but setting off a people's revolution against the mafia and the government either way. This game, even though pixelated by the modern indie way to look retro, is a hyper-violent game. Red pixels splashing everywhere as ribs shatter and skulls are literally crushed under the fists of our strung-out quartet. The hallucinations are strobing and disturbing, and the stages are battles through slums full of dying homeless, clubs full of worn-out and sickly prostitutes, drug dens full of skinheads, and just ugh. If you want an edgelord beat 'em up that just feels bad and icky after you put down the controller, then this one is for you. For me, it will probably remain in my Steam library, never to be played again. Up next is POW, Prisoners of War. Brought to us by SNK in 1988. This 1 to 2 player side-scrolling beat-em-up was obviously inspired by the many post-Vietnam War movies of the 1970s and 1980s, from The Deer Hunter to First Blood. Your job is to break out of the POW camp you are imprisoned in and rescue as many prisoners as possible while killing the camp guards. This is a beat-em-up only in its basic understanding. You punch the guards to death, or grab knives and stab them, or grab machine guns and shoot them, with grenades and body armor spicing things up as you reach radio towers at the end of each stage to call for reinforcements and rescue. While this was in the arcade, I played this on the NES, which was single-player only. The graphics in this game are more reminiscent of the original Double Dragon, and it is a solid, if incredibly simple game. Not the most memorable of titles, but if you have half an hour to kill, this will definitely shove it into a tiger pit trap. The Punisher, arcade version. The Punisher has had a lot of games, more than you would think, and a lot of different developers have tried their hands at translating Marvel's godlike vigilante to the game scene. But in this case, Capcom would give us the 1993 brawler starring Frank Castle, the Punisher. And the second player would be Nick Fury, leader of S.H.I.E.L.D. The goal of both men is to kill well-known villain the Kingpin, who has fought other Marvel heroes like Daredevil, Spider-Man, and the newest hero, Echo. Both Frank and Nick play the exact same way and spend the majority of the game out of their element, meaning beating up thugs with fists and feet, baseball bats, and lead pipes. But the gameplay changes a bit once the enemies start dropping guns and the two men can use what they know best: firearms. Then they start doing more damage until the guns run dry and the screen fills with cartoonish onomatopoeias of blam and other sound effects. The plot sees both men slugging their way through the ranks of mobster goons of little repute or reputation, even fighting robots for some god-awful reason, probably a decision on Capcom's part. Except for a few named villains like Bushwhacker and Jigsaw, until the two men kick the shit out of Kingpin and topple his drug empire scheme. This was the game that, believe it or not, started the Marvel vs. Capcom series of fighting games due to the successful partnership on this title. And thankfully, it was recently brought back to home console and Steam with the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics. If you have that title but didn't play this one, do yourself a favor and boot it up. It's a good, if dumb as hell, time. Rival Turf. This first thing, and first game, of the Rushing Beat trilogy, this 1992 title by Jalico on the SNES, is a 1 to 2 player title where you must rescue main character Jack Flack's girlfriend Heather with the help of police officer Uzi Nelson from rival gang leader Big Al. Unfortunately, I never completed this one either because it has a lot of the same problems as Alien vs. Predator SNES version. It's incredibly stiff, low frame animation and controls you can struggle over. Cheap hits from enemies that are spongy and have way too much health, and your hits do very little damage. It wasn't a good game, and I'm surprised it got a sequel. I'm surprised I played the sequel. Had I known the characters' actual Japanese names were Rick Norton and Douglas Build, I might have given the game more credit. Moving on to the sequel. Brawl Brothers. I had no idea that this was really Rushing Beat 2, or I would have avoided it. Released in 1993 by Jalico on the SNES, it had all the same drawbacks as the previous title, with only a few new wrinkles. Our characters are now known as Hack and Slash in America, Rick Norton and Douglas Build in Japan, and both look like indistinguishably huge wrestlers except for a color palette swap. They're joined by 3 new friends: Lord J the Judo Master, Kazan the Ninja, and Wendy the Pro Wrestler. All of them suck. I could give less of a shit what the plot is, and the game is practically glacial in its pacing and fighting, where enemies are getting in cheap shots left and right, while your now 3 animation frame character is deciding whether or not to land a blow against them. This game is fucking terrible. And there is only one game still on this list that will outdo how bad this one was. Next up is The Simpsons in the arcade. In 1991, you couldn't get away from The Simpsons in pop culture. I had the merchandise too. And now in 2025, they are apparently still going and we still can't get away from them, but for different and more horrifying reasons. Konami, at least, knew the smell of money and what would part American kids from their parents' change with them fast enough between this and the Ninja Turtles. This was a 4-player arcade cabinet where you could play the whole Simpsons family: Homer, Marge with her vacuum, Bart with a skateboard, and Lisa with a jump rope, as they try to recover their baby Maggie, who has been using a diamond as a pacifier after the Simpsons stumble into a botched robbery. They fight all the way across Springfield, running into the whole extended for 1991 cast, either as enemies or as background characters doing what they do on the show, displaying what were jokes back then and what are cringe-worthy memes now, where the family must defeat Mr. Burns, who's wearing a nuclear-powered robot suit, in the end to recover their lost and now perpetually 38-year-old infant. It was a great game back then, looking like a digitized episode of the show. It ran smooth, And for a few months, you couldn't get near the damned arcade cabinet for all the kids wanting to play it and all the parents tut-tutting over this controversial show in game form. Yes, there was a time The Simpsons was seen as a subversive issue and part of the overall moral panic America was suffering. Now, this game in 2025 feels more like The Simpsons did it South Park reference. Itself another show not being allowed to die. But it is sadly a parody of itself. I'm beginning to agree with Tracy Ullman, which in and of itself is a hard thing to do with how much of an unfunny shrew she is, when she was quoted saying, "I gave birth to those little shits," in reference to how the animated short from her own show eventually eclipsed her own fame and the fact that they got more laughs than her. And had she known how much they were going to overshadow her, she would have never allowed the matte graining animated shorts on the air. And who knows? Maybe her massive fucking ego would have saved the world from a nearly 4-decade nightmare of controversy, turning into an establishment, turning into a monument of American sloth and idolatry. Spider-Man the video game, the arcade. In 1991, Sega would bring us an arcade version of everyone's favorite webhead, Spider-Man, in arcade form. The game starts Spider-Man and had 3 more playable characters in Hawkeye, Black Cat, and Namor the Submariner. Why them? Who the fuck knows? But the game was a janky beat-em-up in the same style as the Avengers arcade game. But the sprites were nearly 4 times the size of that title's characters. The game would switch from side-scrolling brawler to platformer in various places, so quite unusual in the genre blends of the arcade. The plot revolves around a magical artifact being recovered from the Kingpin. Hey, we just talked about him with the Punisher. And later, that same artifact must be recovered from Doctor Doom. Along the way, you will fight a group of thugs more at home in a Power Rangers game, but meet Spider-Man villains Kingpin, Venom. Yes, Venom has been around since the late 1980s. Dr. Octopus, Electro, the Lizard, Scorpion, Sandman, Green Goblin, Hobgoblin, and of course Doctor Doom. A rogues gallery we wouldn't much see again until the Insomniac Studios games. Like any plot-light beat-em-up, the goal was to punch everything and get back the MacGuffin, which they do. If you want, and given how many characters they share and relative time frames of development, you could look at Spider-Man, Captain America, the Avengers, and the Punisher as a shared universe series of sequels. I mean, you could do that if you have nothing better to do. Otherwise, yeah, Spidey got an arcade beat 'em up too. The Takeover. This one comes to us by Greek developer Pelican 13 and was additionally written and produced by YouTube game content creator Matt McMuscles, mostly when beat-em-ups were almost non-existent in the game sphere, and it arrived on PC in 2019 as an indie title. And I can only guess at the amount of cash this was needed to produce by a YouTuber. Matt, real name Matt Kowalewski, wanted to represent my Polish Eastern European people here. Also hired the voice talent to help get Antonias Pelikanos, the developer at Pelican 13, across the finish line in the heavily Streets of Rage inspired game. This is honestly a fun title. 3 cops who are entangled with each other in their personal lives and have their own issues trying to take down a city full of rampant gangs burning everything they see. The graphics are gorgeous and the hits are solid and meaty, even if a little slow pace and the stages are a little too long at times. If you love beat-em-ups and need something to tide you over until and if we never get another Streets of Rage sequel, then get a copy of The Takeover. It is definitely worth your time. Next up is Fighting Force. Well, let's get into the major disappointment on the list. Let me dust off the We Need to Talk from whatever the fuck game I left it on, and slap that gold-plated thorn and turd headband onto this motherfucker of a title. at least in the short form. Developed by Core Designs and published by Eidos Interactive. It showed up drunk and severely late to the beat-em-up party by 1997, when the genre was dying and, much like Nightmare Creatures, was trying to move the horror genre from 2 to 3D. Fighting Force was trying to move brawlers from 2D to 3D. And holy shit did they fail hard. Our heroes Hawk, Mace, Alana, and Smasher are trying to defeat near-future villain Dr. Dex Zeng, a criminal mastermind with a 200-plus IQ. Yes, that is what his biography says in the instruction booklet that came with the game back when that happened. Who predicted the end of the world in the year of 2000. Ugh. They try to use the maximum power of the PlayStation 1 that it could produce for this stinker, and it just showed its age and ass the second it was in the disc tray. Bad hit detection, misalignment when picking up weapons and objects, enemies made of hit points, and your buff gym rats can barely hurt them. A camera that runs wild and spins where it wants to while the fight is going on, and everyone looks like polygonal syphilis. I hated this game. I was disappointed in this game. I even got more angry when I found out this was originally supposed to be the fourth Streets of Rage game. I never finished it. I got rid of it as soon as I could. Fuck this game. Fuck the development of it. Fuck everything about it. Don't play it, and don't believe anyone that says this is a hidden gem. I'd be wary of where they pulled that hidden gem from, because it's likely got fecal stains on it. Sifu. I was really looking forward to this one. Brought to us by developer Slowclap in 2022 and set in China. You play a martial arts instructor on a revenge mission to avenge your master from your master's killer, whose death you witnessed as a child. And your master's killer technically killed you too, save for a magic jade necklace that brought you back to life, and which brings you back to life again and again, but only a certain number of times and at a much greater age than when you last left off. This is what we call a monkey's paw in fiction. While this is classified as a beat-em-up, don't let that fool you. Sifu is really more of a rhythm game, as the battles play out with the skill and finesse and, to quote the old song, expert timing of your average Jackie Chan film. The animation is gorgeous, the set pieces are fun and fantastic, but the game, at least for me, is so precise and so frame perfect to succeed. Well, quite frankly, my hands just don't have the twitch reflexes they used to, so it's unlikely I will ever be able to complete Sifu. That's not a bad thing and not a knock against the game. It's just going to relegate it to a sometimes game if I'm in the mood for a kung fu epic to play. Next up, Streets of Rage 1 and 3. These two are the Streets of Rage games I don't really talk about much. Brought to us in 1991 and 1994 respectively, by Sega. They are games I played around and after Streets of Rage 2. To be honest, I don't think these are very good games. Streets of Rage 1 is way too simple, slow, and muddy compared to its much improved sequel, which I played after 2. And Streets 3 was just an escalation for the sake of escalation. Too bright. Stages with epilepsy-inducing lights, the removal of a great character in Max for a shitty character in Cyborg Arm Dr. Zahn, a timer midway through the game that if you didn't beat the enemies and figure your way out through a maze of rooms fast enough, a bomb went off and into the game, and just, ugh. It was piss poor compared to the game before it. Thankfully, Streets 4 redeemed the series, at least in my opinion. So the even-numbered sequels are the best parts of the Streets of Rage series, and it is okay if you disagree with that. I don't really care if you don't. Golden Axe. Oof. This title came out in 1989 from Sega, the same year as Final Fight, one of my all-time favorite games. Again, the idea is a fantasy-themed beat-em-up, obviously inspired by movies like Conan the Barbarian or Red Sonja. Yes, there was a time in the 1980s where there was a glut of barbarian-themed movies, so much so, it was a barbarian exploitation movement in cinema, with movies such as The Beastmaster, Deathstalker, The Barbarians, and of course Mystery Science Theater 3000 and Riff Trax classics Ator the Fighting Eagle and Ator 2 the Blade Master. Who could forget? But all of them are obvious influences and early 1980s lead ups to Golden Axe. Yet this game just isn't good. It's stiff to control, slow, and already graphically inferior to a game that came out that year, let alone a year or two later. The most powerful of the magic Super Crush maneuvers are the best parts of the game, eating up a lot of graphical power. But otherwise, this game is just inferior to the games around it, which is too bad. But it did spawn a series of sequels and is considered a classic for its time. For me, the only Golden Axe game we need to play is Golden Axe The Revenge of Death Adder, if you can find it somewhere. And lastly, Kung Fu. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this 1986 NES classic. A port of the 1984 hit Kung Fu Master. This title is one of 16 titles released for North American debut of the Nintendo Entertainment System. It is extremely simple. Kick and punch at the A and B buttons, kneel to hit low to the ground enemies, press up to jump and kick, but wave after wave of enemies would slide towards the hero, named Thomas. Kicks and punches his way through the rival kung fu masters, snakes, and other assorted bad guys as he slowly climbs a tower of deadly enemies, similar to the original plot of Bruce Lee's last film, Game of Death, which he passed away during filming. Kung Fu Master, and later the simplified Kung Fu, is regarded as the first beat 'em up and has impacted the legacy of the genre or its entire history from the early 1980s until today. And goddamn if I didn't waste many hours trying to get to the top of this pagoda of pain. I never did. But if any game could be said to have begun my love affair with the brawler genre, Kung Fu is that game. Whew. That's a lot of games in one retrospective. 25 if you've been keeping count at home. Needless to say, I love the genre of video game. I hope I have done this collection justice, or maybe named some titles you remember, or would like to try for yourself if you can find them. There are tons more brawlers than what I named here. Many even I never got to play. And there was a mystery game out there in the beat 'em up land that I just cannot remember the name of. I assume it came out around 1991, looked suspiciously like a Capcom game, and had 4 pseudo-samurai characters fighting through the modern day. I know there were 4 characters with swords, one of which was a woman in traditional Shinto priest garb, and her super move was to release moths to swarm and damage the enemies. If anyone out there can name this game or knows what I'm talking about, please let us know in the comments section. I would really appreciate it. All right, dear listeners, that's a lot of information. Now it's time for you to go out yourself and reclaim the streets from injustice and evil. Just don't forget to tape up your wrists and put on your coolest denim jackets and 80s sweatbands. Be the bad dude you were always meant to be. Thank you for listening. Deleted Saves would like to thank Brad, Keith Gasper, Orden Wells, Mas Lama, and Martin Kubel for being patrons of the show. If you would like to become a patron of the show, please go to patreon.com and check out Deleted Saves podcast. All donations go directly towards maintaining the show itself. Thank you.